So Padmasambhava, the meeting of the rational and the more than rational. So as you may know, once upon a time, in about the 8th century, the king of Tibet, Tritsen wanted to establish Buddhism in his country. And he knew he needed help with that, so he called on the scholar abbot Shantarakshita to come and help. And as Trish was saying, they started trying to build a monastery. And every day they'd build the monastery, and then at night the demons would come out and they'd knock it down again. And like Trish, I recognise the parallels of that in my own experience with Dharma practice. I don't know about you. We're very much in the territory of metaphor here, so it's worth bearing that in mind as you hear the story. Yeah. So what was going on? Well, it was the local indigenous spirits and their shamanic followers, who were called the Bonpos. They were putting up a fierce opposition to the Dharma becoming established in Tibet, and they even used witchcraft against Shantarakshita. And although he was a monk, and although he was a scholar, he was even an abbot, he didn't have the powers to meet those energies. He knew that he needed something more, he needed help. And in fact, he actually left Tibet and then came back again. They sort of drove him out and he came back. So he asked the king to send for the help of Padmasambhava. Because Padmasambhava was not only a master of Buddhist scholarship and all those practices on which Dharma practice is built. Like Sue was saying, the process of transformation isn't just what happens some lofty stage along the path. It's there right at the start when you learn the mindfulness of breathing, the metta bhavana, those basic practices. Padmasambhava was master of all of that. And he was also what's known as a siddha. A siddha. So siddhis are magical powers, and a siddha is one who has magical powers. A tantric adept, they're sometimes called. And he knew how to engage the psychic powers stirred up in tantric meditation and really engage with those demonic forces, the forces of the depths. And on his way to Tibet, even as he was trying to get to Tibet, each step of the way he encountered these forces. So I'm just going to read you a little bit from this, which is the life and liberation of Padmasambhava, a most extraordinary biography and more than biography of Padmasambhava. Then in the autumn, Padma came to the castle of Mangyul. A fury of the region of Zhangjung, Yamun, the eminent enemy, thought she could crush the guru between two stone mountains. But he rose up in the sky, and the humiliated fury offered the heart of her life. As her secret name, she was called Debt of Turquoises and Diamonds, and the guru gave her a great treasure to watch over. Then on the plateau of the sky he reached the Black Castle. The white darkening of the glaciers thought a thunderbolt would destroy him. But the guru, surrounding her with one finger, swept her away into a lake. The terrified Darkini fled as far as the lake of Palmo Paltang. At once the water began to boil. The flesh dropped from her bones, and the guru, hurling a vajra, blinded her in one eye. Whereupon she rose above the surface and uttered this supplication. Face of the Master, O Vajra, Dorje Tertren Sal, I swear I will do no more harm. This solemn promise comforts me. What else can I do? I yield. I approach as the guru's vassal. And she gave the heart of her life, which he bound her, while he bound her by an oath. And as her secret name she was called the unfleshed turquoise and diamond lamp. And he committed a great treasure to her care. So he meets these inimical forces, and again it says they give him the heart of their life, and then he gives them a treasure to guard. So he trusts them. He meets them. He doesn't give way to them. They are subdued, and he gives them a treasure to guard, so they become part of taking care of the whole. The whole. And eventually, having made this journey, and there are many, many such encounters as that, all described in graphic detail, eventually Padmasambhava arrives at the Toddlung Pleasure Park on the banks of the river Brahmaputra, where he is to meet the king. And what happens in that meeting, we're going to hear in more detail tonight. We're going to read together the story, but essentially the king, the upholder of temporal power, worldly power, is none too keen to bow down to Padmasambhava, who is the embodiment of the higher spiritual powers that are needed to transform those deeper, stronger demon energies. And it's those energies that were standing in the way of Buddhism becoming established in Tibet. So Padmasambhava does subdue the demons, and he enlists their support in the building of the great monastery of Samye. And there are many stories in here about the Nagas. So Nagas are these serpent dragons that symbolise the energies of the depths. They're one of those archetypal symbols, those deep serpentine, dragony sort of energies. And again he enlists them, and they bring all their gold at one point. It's wonderful, because they run out of resources, and Nagas bring their gold, and the monastery is built. And the Dharma is established in Tibet. So, who is this Padmasambhava? Well, as we've heard, he was a tantric adept to Siddha, and he's said to have lived in the 8th century. It's said he was born in Udayana, which is also pronounced or translated as Urgyen, in the region of Pakistan. And he studied and practiced the Dharma for many years. He was a very, very well-practiced Dharma-farer. Then he went to Tibet, helped to establish Buddhism there, and when he was done, he went off somewhere else, tamed some more ogres, and disappeared off to the copper-coloured mountain, where it is said he still resides. So that's a brief, kind of reasonable account, well, perhaps up till the last bit, that's perhaps acceptable to our rational minds. But Padmasambhava isn't just a historical figure. He's more than that. Just as we aren't just rational beings, we're more than that. And there is this extraordinary biography, as I said, The Life and Liberation of Padmasambhava. And in here, it tells us that he was born as an emanation of the Buddha Amitabha. So the archetypal red Buddha of the Western realm, who's the embodiment of compassion. And it's said that he appeared spontaneously in a lotus on a lake in the land of Udayana. And his name, Padmasambhava, means lotus born. So Padma is lotus, Sambhava, born. Bhava, becoming, like in Metabhavana. Yeah. And he was brought up by the king of the country as though he were his own son. But Padmasambhava decided to leave the worldly life and become a bhikkhu, a monk. Not unlike the historical Buddha, he went forth from his kingly upbringing. And as we say, he studied all aspects of Buddhism. He also studied medicine, he studied astrology, had many different facets, as we'll hear tonight. And he spent years meditating in all the cremation grounds of India and the Himalayas. So these were the cremation grounds where the bodies were left, to be burnt. And this book gives graphic descriptions of the unspeakable horrors of those places. And they exist on that level, but they symbolise the endless fearful sufferings of conditioned existence. And I don't know about you, but I can certainly think of times in my life when I felt like I was in a cremation ground, when life has been very, very painful. And yes, there's a process of transformation going on, but it's not one that I want, and I really need help to engage with that creatively. So Padmasambhava goes to these cremation grounds, he meditates there, he converts the Darkinis, the embodiments of energy that he meets there, And he's a controversial figure all the way through his life. Twice he flouts convention so much that people try to burn him alive. But each time he emerges unscathed, rising, phoenix-like above the flames. And as I say, after he's done all his work, he flies off to the land of the Rakshasas, a race of demons, and he converts them too and goes to live on the copper-coloured mountain. So in Vasantra's book, Meeting the Buddhas, which I'm sure some of you know, he's got a very lovely passage which just evokes a bit more of these qualities of Padmasambhava and what he's like. So he says, talking of this book actually, Padmasambhava's biography is of an unequalled richness. It's one of the great spiritual documents of mankind. Within it, inner and outer events are so fused that it's frequently impossible to decide on what level of reality the events took place. Are we watching actual events in the outside world, events which seem to us preternatural? Are we reliving Padmasambhava's visionary experience? Are we dreaming? And he goes on to say, this was, I thought quite striking. As presented in his story, Padmasambhava becomes a sort of portmanteau figure, so a kind of spiritual suitcase, an embodiment in one person of all the accumulated knowledge, wisdom, love and power of the Buddhist tradition. He's master of all secular arts and sciences, as well as all three yamas of Buddhism. In this way, he represents the guru par excellence. For a guru prepares himself for his task of communicating the Dharma by first making himself a receptacle of the Buddhist tradition. From his teachers he receives the nectar of the Dharma, handed down from teacher to disciple, ever since Shakyamuni managed to communicate it to Kondinya in the deer park at Sana. And then he's got this lovely image. I'm reminded of a scene from an old Hollywood film, in which, at a party of the rich and famous, there was a great pyramid of champagne glasses. A liveried waiter arrives with a great bottle of champagne and kept pouring it into the top glass. When this was full, it overflowed and the bubbling liquid filled each tier of glasses, down and down in a foaming cascade. It is as though Shakyamuni Buddha is the top glass, who made himself open to the transcendental. However, anyone who has absorbed the champagne brilliance of the Dharma cannot help but let it flow through them to others. In this way, the lineages of teaching are created. Padmasambhava represents a confluence of all these lineages. He is like a great crystal chalice in which all the bubbling streams of the Dharma meet. So there's an image. And Padmasambhava is a shapeshifter. He doesn't only appear in one form. He can take different forms depending on what's most helpful, what's most needed, who and what he needs to meet. After all, he is just a stream of spiritual energy which can take whatever form is needed. And as I mentioned last night, there are these 8 main forms, and we've got this tanker on the wall with depictions of them. And I thought I'd just give you a flavour of 3 of them, and then at some point later on, if you want, you can go and have a look and work out which one's which on the picture. So, first of all, Padmasambhava, like the main form of Padmasambhava. So Padmasambhava sits on a brilliant red lotus throne, and on the brilliant red lotus throne there's an immaculate white moon mat. And there he sits. He sits in meditation, but he has one foot reaching down in a posture that's called royal ease. So he's in meditation, he's also stepping into the world. And he wears 3 robes. The innermost robe of the secret is blue, represents the secret, deepest teachings of the Dharma. Then he has a yellow robe, which is the robe of the monk, and that really symbolises the ethical practice, the practice of the precepts. And he has a red flowing cloak, which is described as the red flowing cloak of the Mahayana. It's this great cloak of love and compassion. In his hand, he holds a skull cup, which is always a symbol of shunyata, of the open dimension of being, emptiness, and it's filled with the bliss of emptiness. He's got a staff, not in that picture on the refuge tree, but he normally has a staff. Our Padmasambhava here's got a staff, which is a symbolic embodiment of the Darkini, the consort, the female energies, his female energies, the female aspects of enlightenment. So that's integrated as well. And in his hand, his right hand, he holds a vajra, so a diamond thunderbolt. And as you may know, the diamond thunderbolt symbolises one end you've got the 5 poisons, the other end you've got the 5 wisdoms, and in the middle you've got this sphere that represents shunyata, so it's the transformation of the energy of the poisons into the 5 wisdoms. So he's embodying all of that. He wears a red skull cap, and it's got the jewels of the 5 Buddhas here, the sun and the moon, because he's beyond all time. And at the top, he's got a half a vajra with a vulture's feather coming out the top, because the vulture is associated with Padmasambhava. It's the bird that flies highest. He wears gold earrings. He's got long black hair that flows down. And he has this smile that's described as a wrathful smile. Don't mess. No messing. So that's the main form of Padmasambhava. But then there's the one who meditates in the cremation ground. And he's called Nyima Odza, which means sun rays guru. And if any of you have been in the shrine room at Tivatmaloka, there's an amazing picture of him where he's all sun rays. Yeah. So, Padmasambhava enters the cremation ground and sits in meditation with his back to a stupa or reliquary. He becomes Nyima Odza, sun rays guru. This is Padmasambhava as Siddha and Yogin. He wears only a loincloth of tiger skin, a meditation sash, and a crown of skulls. Yellow light radiates from his body, his hair. His hair, combed upwards, is crowned with a vajra. In the right hand he holds a trident staff. In the left hand he plays with the rays of the sun. So this is to do with symbolising the fact that he's beyond time. Yeah. And then there's one of the wrathful forms of Padmasambhava called Dorje Drollo. Immutable guru with the loose hanging stomach. He rides through the jungle of life on a tigress. His expression is ferocious, and he is enhaloed with flames. His massive dark brown body is garlanded with skulls. That means he's triumphed over impermanence. He's gone beyond impermanence. He waves a thunderbolt in his right hand, a vajra, and he points a purba with his left. So that's a purba there. It's a demon dagger. And they're not for killing demons, but they're for pinning them down and naming them. You name a demon and it gives up the heart of its life to you. There we are. Yeah. So this is Padmasambhava, the subduer of demons. So he can take different forms. I just wanted to mention something about the symbolism of the tiger, which I think is really interesting. So in one manifestation he wears a tiger skin, in fact in more than one manifestation. In another he's riding a tigress. And there's another form, Guru Sendge Dradok, where he's described as one who teaches with a lion's voice. And obviously the tiger can be understood as this symbol of our deeper, wilder energies. The inner wild energies that we need, and we need to transform them, or they're just going to block us just like the demons and the those spirits in Tibet wanted to stop the Dharma getting established in Tibet. We won't establish the Dharma in us unless we've really come into relationship with these energies. So all of this points to the fact that Padmasambhava has tamed his inner tiger. He's got all those strong energies of the depths supporting what he's doing. And it just crossed my mind when I was thinking about it, you know, this symbolism of the tiger for wild energies, it is really archetypal, and it comes right up to the present time. If you think about that book by Peter Levine about trauma, very famous book about the somatic approach to trauma, and it's called Waking the Tiger. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say more about that, but it just really struck me. Yeah. So, Padmasambhava has a historical existence and an archetypal or mythic existence, just like the Buddha. So what are we to make of this? Oh. You're being prodded by the purdah. Yeah, so there's an important teaching that goes back to the Pali Canon, which tells us that the Buddha didn't just have one body. He didn't just have his earthly historical body. The Buddha didn't just have an earthly historical body. He did, and that's his what's sometimes called his emanation body, Nirmanakaya. But he also had another body, which is beyond space and time, which is called the Dharmakaya, his Dharma body. And this was partly understood as being the body of his teachings. I mean, we talk about a body of work, don't we, or a body of teaching. So you can understand it on that level. But a Dharmakaya is much more than that. And the later tradition really brought this out. So you probably know there's that phrase that the teachings of the Buddha are sometimes said to be like fingers pointing at the moon. So the real truth that they're pointing at is beyond any one of the pointings. We need the pointings to point us in the direction, but if we fixate on the finger and not on the moon, we're going to miss the point. So you could say that the Dharmakaya it's a way of understanding that moon that the fingers are pointing at, the real truth, the deepest meaning of the Buddha's teachings. And sometimes it's symbolised by the blue sky, which is also a symbol of shunyata, of emptiness. So it's that pointing to the fact that the real truth is beyond, but we need pointers to it that we can see and engage with. So we've got these two bodies, yeah, the historical earthly body we can know about and talk about in historical terms, and then this almost ineffable truth that's up here. And all that's great, but we need to be able to connect between them. So in the Mahayana, in the later tradition, this third body emerged between the other two, and this is where all these archetypal figures hang out. It's where you find the mandala of the 5 Buddhas we've got up there, all these archetypal Buddhas and Bodhisattvas we've got here on the left of the refuge tree. They didn't have a historical existence. It doesn't mean they're not real. It's a kind of intermediate realm. And they're images which embody different aspects of the truth of that Dharmakaya, of that blue sky, which you can see is all around in our picture of the refuge tree here. They're all they're almost like condensations of the truth from the blue sky into these different aspects. And this intermediate realm or body is called the Sambhogakaya, or the body of enjoyment, or the body of bliss. So it's very easy to get really literal and rational and think, if the Buddha was just a historical being, then we know where to put him, we can fit him into our existing view of the world, our existing framework of thinking. But he's more than we can conceive of with our rational minds. And we need some way of starting to make connection with, move towards, resonate more deeply with, realise what that means. And Bhante's always said that it's easier to make a connection with these bigger dharmic truths when they're embodied in figures, because we can relate to figures as the embodiments of these different qualities. Like with the 5 Buddha mandala, you know, whether it is love and compassion or wisdom or generosity or fearlessness, each of the Buddhas has and embodies those qualities, and we can deepen our connection with them through those. Hence this archetypal realm emerged. So we could say that Padmasambhava is both in the Nirmanakaya, the historical realm, and in that archetypal Sambhogakaya realm. And they're both outflowings of that pure truth of the Dharmakaya, like that champagne that flows down into those figures. So why does this matter? I've already said it, but non-repetition is the canker of the sacred teachings. Spiritual practice doesn't just happen on a rational level. We all know this. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. Bhante famously said, the central challenge of the spiritual life is to find the emotional equivalents for our intellectual understandings, yeah? So we can think something's a nice idea, and we quite like the idea of changing ourselves or setting out on a path that leads to the end of suffering, great. When we actually come to do it, just like King Tritz and Detson, the deeper forces come up and our energies rise up, and they're not all in agreement. And we need help. We need to find ways of engaging these energies. And images, myth and story, they're all ways of doing this. And these archetypal figures who embody those qualities and energies that we're aspiring to cultivate, or you could say reveal in ourselves. Yeah. And if we fall into that trap of thinking these figures aren't real, then we fall into a trap that Bante's talked about as literalism. It's quite interesting. In one place, Bhante talks about the Mara of literalism. So Mara is the embodiment of doubt. He's a figure that embodies doubt, that tries to stop the Buddha on the eve of his enlightenment. And he says literalism is a Mara. And then in the same place, he talks about the Mara of literalism. And then he talks about the magic of metaphor. So, when we talk metaphorically, we're talking about something we can experience, but we're not pinning it down. Metaphor literally means, from the ancient Greek, it means that which carries across. So these images, these metaphors, can carry us across from the mundane world in the direction of the transcendental. And, of course, as I've said, there's more to us than just our rational faculties. We have a thinking part. We also have a feeling, emotional part. We've got an embodied sensing, knowing, gut feeling kind of part. And we have this faculty, Bhante calls the imaginal faculty. We have an imagination. And it's interesting, I'm aware of time, so I could say quite a bit more about how these four aspects of us are there. They come out in the work of William Blake, which is really fascinating. In the 18th century, he was very aware of those aspects of our psyche, very resonantly with the same way that Jung in the 20th century recognised those four faculties: thinking, feeling, sensing and intuition. Yeah. I think what's important is for us here and now is just recognising we've got this more than our rational, that if you could say kind of extends down into our felt sense, into our body, into that body wisdom. And we also have that faculty that intuits more than in sense of that in us resonating with that which is ultimate in the universe, you could say. We have that kind of, something, but it's in a more than a rational kind of way. Yeah. So we can extend our awareness beyond the head, beyond the rational, into the body. What we talk about embodied wisdom, don't we? And the Buddha taught the very first foundation of mindfulness is the body. There can be a kind of intuitive sense body response to the truth, whether it's a gut feeling or an experience of bliss in meditation, and it helps us recognise our consciousness is expanding, it's growing. And all of this is more than rational. It's connecting with these deeper energies and integrating them into our practice. And our imagination, in the other direction if you like, and don't take this literally either, but our imagination is working all the time. And if we're not actively using our imagination, it will use us. So an example might be that we talk about our imagination being captured. It captured my imagination. But actually, if we're not aware of when that happens, our imagination can get captured by all sorts of things. In fact, it can get taken hostage, to extend that metaphor, that image. It can get taken hostage by anxiety, which just often is a product of our imagination. It's a reactive imagination, if you like. It certainly can get taken hostage by consumerism. We only have to look around us to see how much people are driven by consumerism, and so many other things, racism, all kinds of things. And we know that feeling. If we stop and we get in touch with ourselves, we know that feeling when we've got swept away, captured. But it's almost like the imagination is hungry for images. It's not fussy what they are, but we need to be careful what we feed it. What we dwell on, we become. So if we just let our imaginations be full of worldly, material images, that's where we'll be bound. If we can bring ourselves into relationship with archetypal images, that world that's more than, then that can become, we can open into that. And that's what Padmasambhava's offering us. So we come a bit of a long way from Tibet, but we're making that same journey that Padmasambhava made. And as I've said, we're likely to we do encounter those same inimical forces. Whether it's energy blocks in our bodies, or maras, or demons that lurk in our minds. I've often had the image, they don't just lurk in our minds, sometimes they come along and they put bags over my head. I thought I could see where I was going. It was like, no, the demons have put a bag over my head. Can't see anything at the moment. Padmasambhava is an embodiment of our capacity to meet and transform all those energies. Yeah. And Bhante has a very particular and strong connection with Padmasambhava. It's what he's done in bringing Buddhism to the West in the way that he's been part of. He's really had to work with those demons and those energies. And he describes in his memoirs, I won't read it to you now, but I can point you at it, his first encounter with Padmasambhava, when he knew, he said, though I had not seen it before, it was strangely familiar. When he first saw the image of Padmasambhava, it was as familiar as my own self, yet at the same time infinitely mysterious, infinitely wonderful, and infinitely inspiring. Familiar, mysterious and wonderful, it was to remain. Indeed, the precious Guru was to occupy a permanent place in my spiritual life. And he was given the name Urgyen by one of his teachers, connecting him with Padmasambhava, and Urgyen House was where he spent his last days. So I think I better leave it there. But hopefully that gives you a bit more of a sense of who Padmasambhava is and why the meeting of the rational with the more than rational is so important.